Fatherless pie is a traditional dish from the Isle of Man, typically served with boiled fish on Good Friday. This savory pie is made with simple ingredients like thinly sliced potatoes, butter, milk, and shortcrust pastry. Thankfully, the name does not refer to children who have lost their father, because that would be rather sad. Its origins are somewhat obscure, but it's believed to have been created as a meatless dish in accordance with Christian traditions of fasting and abstaining from meat on that day. I found this recipe in the Manx Cookery book of favorite dishes published in 1908. So let's see if we can do it justice. The recipe calls for cutting 2 pounds of potatoes into thin slices. I used a mandolin to make it easy, but you do have to be careful, watch your fingers. And I placed the potatoes into a bowl of cold water so the potatoes didn't brown during this step. Next, go ahead and grab a pie dish, and you want to use butter and butter that thoroughly, all the sides and the bottom, so it's completely covered in butter. Now, drain the potatoes for the next step. We will start to add the potatoes and 6 ounces of butter in layers to the pie dish. Add the potatoes in a good layer and alternate with butter, pepper, and salt, and then just continue repeating that process until you've used all the potatoes and butter. Try to make sure there aren't too many large gaps in the potatoes, and you can season this to taste. I use probably up to 1 teaspoon of salt and maybe half teaspoon of pepper. The recipe calls for a cupful of milk and water. I interpreted that as meaning 1 cup, and it worked out. The 1908 cookbook calls for a shortcrust pastry but doesn't give a recipe for it, so I grabbed this one from Great British Chefs. Start by sifting 8 3/4 ounces of flour, that's approximately 1 3/4 cups, and then add 1 teaspoon salt. After that, add 4 1/2 ounces of butter, or 9 tablespoons. If you're using a food processor like I am, pulse the butter and flour together until the mix resembles fine breadcrumbs. It's important to pulse the dough rather than continuously running the motor so you don't overwork the pastry. Add a tablespoon of ice-cold water at a time to the food processor and lightly pulse. Repeat this until the dough just starts to come together into a ball. I used 3 tablespoons and that worked out great for me. Turn the ball of dough onto a work surface and knead it lightly to form it and shape it into a small, thick disc. Remember not to overwork the dough because you don't want to form a bunch of gluten. Go ahead and wrap that and throw it in the refrigerator for 30 minutes. Take it out, let it rest for 15 minutes at room temperature. This step causes the gluten to relax, which helps to stop shrinkage when cooking. On a lightly floured surface, roll out the dough so it is about 1 inch larger than the pie pan that you're working with. Just take it slow and keep at it, and eventually you'll have just the right size. Roll the pastry dough onto the rolling pin so it's easy to unroll on top of the pie. Again, there should be about a 1 inch overhang on the edges. Go ahead and dust off any extra flour, reposition the dough if needed, and fold the dough underneath itself. And later, you'll be able to crimp and make kind of a decorative crimp. I will have to say that pastry and decorating crusts, especially the crimping process, is not my specialty, but I just do my best, and usually it just works out. I thought this one turned out pretty well. Now, in order to get a really nice brown crust, you want to make an egg wash. Just whisk 1 egg and start brushing it so it completely coats the top of the crust and those edges as well. When it bakes, it'll turn a nice golden brown. Bake that for about 60 minutes, and if the crust is getting too brown, go ahead and cover it with foil and it'll turn out perfectly. You can find the recipe in the description. If you make it, I really hope you enjoy it. And as always, take care.